Good morning, y'all. So, thought I'd take y'all along on my commute to work. And I talk a lot about Mickey, because Mickey said to. One of these days, y'all are going to meet Mickey. Anyway, Mickey's a lady at the office who retired and then went ahead and came back to work. We're blessed to have her. Anyway, so Mickey said that I should explain how essentially work boots and high heels, how did all the country and the livestock and all of that stuff come about in my life. So we're going to talk about this on the way to work. So I grew up in Louisiana, in Allen Parish, in a trailer out in the middle of the woods. And I spent the summers at my dad's in California, and he was a banker. And there was a big, nice house at the top of a private lane on a little old mountain with the fancy cars and the baby grand piano. So I always tell everybody I had the best of both worlds. I learned how to drive on a tractor, and I know what fork to eat with. Now, I didn't grow up on a farm, so to speak. We had acres, like the yard was like 2 acres. But aunts and uncles and everybody had cows. But anyway, I left Allen Parish when I was young. I was bored. I wanted to go see what was out there. So I left, and I did a couple years in Maryland, in the Baltimore, Washington metropolitan area. And then I did a couple of years in Las Vegas. And then I visited Santa Barbara. And I was like, oh, I got to live there for once. I only lived there for a year because it was way too expensive. You work just to pay your rent. But anyway, I decided to move back to Louisiana. I'd been gone about 10 years, maybe a little bit more. I don't know. I'm not very good at this time frame. And when I had already gave notice to my house and work. I actually gave them a couple of months notice. And after I'd given notice and we're packing and planning and everything's going on, why are you going so slow? Oh, just because you an ass. Okay. Anyway, sorry I say bad words when I drive. Anyway, Hurricane Katrina and Rita were in the works when I gave my notice and left, to leave California. So Katrina had just happened, and my friends in California were like, no, you don't want to go down there now. And I'm like, well, look, I'm going home. That's just all there is to it. And I drove from California to Louisiana, and I stopped by Vegas and visited some friends. Anyway, as I was driving to Louisiana, Hurricane Rita came. And just for a little clarity, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. Hurricane Rita hit the other side of the state. So both sides of the state got it. Where I'm from, we were Hurricane Rita. So I pull up to Aunt Sandra and Uncle Burl's house. It was like a day after. And, see everything. And I'm like, okay, well, I got to get a job. Well, I went and applied for, it was the craft services. They had started, FEMA came in and with the FEMA trailers, those campers that they put out for temporary housing back then. Now, I will say, when I say we, I mean Louisiana. Yeah, we did terrible with those campers. Anyway, I went and applied and for a job as a carpenter helper. And, of course, I filled out the application. I was truthful. I'd been in, real estate, property management, homeowners associations, all of those things. And the woman that interviewed me looked at me and she's like, why do you want to be a carpenter's helper? And I said, well, I've already figured out that my brain can work. It's time to see if my body can work. And she goes, and she actually asked me if I had a resume. And I was like, well, I do, but I didn't think that was, needed for a carpenter's helper position. Anyway, she said that they were on a hiring freeze just then, but she didn't see any problem with me, being a carpenter's helper. Okay, go. Audi, go. I'm gonna honk at you. No, it wasn't you, it was the Honda in front. Just as bad. And anyway, she's like, hey, as soon as they lift that hiring freeze, I'll give you a call and you can come to work. And I said, all right. Well, she ended up calling me the next day and saying, hey, I got a job for you, but it's not what you want. And I was like, can I wear jeans and boots? She said, yep, absolutely. And I went to work in operations and disaster relief. And I stayed in there in disaster relief for a few years. I'm still in disaster relief. But anyway, after a while, my mom, who was still living in California, she came down to visit. And when she was down visiting, she had a TIA, which is a very small stroke. Okay, she didn't have another one. It was all right. But then it was like, hey, Mom, why don't you go ahead and move back home to Allen Parish and, just so there'd be more community, more family around. Well, she did. She moved in, and I kept on working. And disaster relief in general, you're kindly working off. When you live out in the woods, it's not like you're going to get a good paying job 5 minutes from your house. Well, I was working, and after a couple of years, it got to where Mom's memory was getting worse. And so if I was gone on a job and I was gone for 3 months and even came home to visit in between there, she really felt like I was gone for a year, And as that kept going on, it was like, okay, I need to stop working off, And I said, okay, let's adjust household, how much you're going to spend to, live every day. And, and I'll quit working off. Well, so I stopped working off. Now, here's the reality is that my mom did not need me to stare at her all day. She didn't need help with nothing. She just needed me, dude, I'm not going to let you squeeze in because you're just rude. You can get behind me. Oh, fucking asshole. Excuse my language. Anyway, so I was at home. I was at the house. Mom was there. She was fine. And I needed something to do. I needed something to do that was close by my house. And so Aunt Sandra and Uncle Burl had acreage and cows right down the road from my place. So, look, y'all did pretty good on this little merge thing. Good job. Good job. You're going to have to post videos when people are doing good things. So I went over to Uncle Burl and I was like, hey, can I just come make a hand? Well, I think he thought I was crazy. And, Uncle Burl, he loves animals and kids. And I count as a kid. Okay, get up to speed. Later, he was like, he'd feel bad, and he was like, hey, I hate that I can't, pay you. It was always all right because I just needed something to do. Now, I went to work there, and as far as like a professional career, it was very, very useful. So, for y'all to know what a farm hand is, a hand, you're a farm hand, and you know, you got some experience, you might be the top hand, but the reality is a hand does whatever they're told to do, okay? And why I say that was so good for me is I had been a boss for a very long time, okay? I had been a boss for a very long time. And when I started showing up there with Uncle Burl, I had no idea what I was doing. And he didn't explain the plan to me. You know, it's not like, hey, we had a safety meeting in the morning and we discussed what we were going to do. I just followed him around and did what I was told. And that was such a wonderful thing. I think that a lot of people in the workforce now have missed that, actually being a hand. You know, I don't think that you can be a good boss until you're a good hand. And sometimes that hand is, their only job is to do what they're told. You know, if I was told to open a gate, I opened the gate. I was run, go, get. I did a lot of run and go getting. And then what was funny is I don't like to exercise, but I'd literally run and get whatever it was. And then I'd walk back and catch my breath. And Uncle Burr was like, you ain't got to run. I was like, that's the only exercise that I ever get. Hey, when I moved back to town, it took me a while to get out of the habit of running to go get. Oh, yeah. So, anyway, lost the phone. That's all right, I'm driving. Y'all be all right for a minute. Anyway, I love the work. I absolutely loved the work. I loved getting up and going over there. I loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Excuse me. To where I worked with Uncle Burl long enough that, you know, I got good at a few things. And then I started working for some other ranchers. And then I made a reputation. I'm going to be a good hand. I'm going to do what I'm told. I learn. I care about the animals. And I'm not going to tear up your equipment. Anyway, I had the privilege of doing farm work for a living for a good long while. I did cows, horses, hay, and watermelons. We'll talk about that more later. But if you ever had a job where you loved getting up and going to work every day, that was me. Loved every minute of it. Now, the problem is that for me to be able to do that for a living, I had to reduce my living costs to $500 a month. And I did it and I loved it. I got tired of being poor. So I came back to work. Anyway, that's where the country came in. Now we're back in high heels, but yeah, I can still back up a trailer and I can still work cows. Hey, y'all have a good day. Be safe. Be respectful. Say the truth out loud.